I am so excited to announce that I have released the first official tarot diagnosis spread book. Tarot and Self-Discovery is a therapeutic tarot journey with over 200 spreads, including over 152 card prompts and over 50 robust tarot spreads. You can purchase a physical copy on Amazon or a digital copy at thetarotdiagnosis.com. You are listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. So this is an interesting episode and a bit different than my usual episodes because I'm exploring the idea of social media ethics specifically related to TikTok tarot readings. To talk about this, I'm joined by someone you actually might be familiar with on TikTok. Buell is an intuitive medium whose practice exploded thanks to the power of social media, specifically TikTok. And they work to provide meaningful insight and guidance for those who are truly looking to align themselves with their spirit guides, their ancestors, and their higher self. Together, we're going to be exploring how to protect yourself while you're on social media and how to identify both red and green flags when it comes to different tarot talk content creators. Hey, Annie.
Hi.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I've been super eager to talk more about this idea of tarot ethics with you because we had a really great conversation not too long ago. And we spent quite a bit of time kind of going over, what it means to be a tarot reader on social media. And you had actually started this series on TikTok called Terrible Tarot, which then also led to another series called Trustworthy Tarot. And that's how I found you, actually. And I know it resonated not only with me, but a significant amount of other people who are either tarot readers or at least exist in tarot adjacent worlds. So I'm curious. And also for folks who may not be familiar with the series, can you just talk a little bit about what it is and why you even started it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a series that I obviously started, I want to say back in October, maybe a little late September, but I started it. It was very abrupt. I was just sitting in my living room scrolling through on TikTok as one does.
Right.
And because I'm a medium and a lot of my For You page, a lot of the people that I follow are in that spiritual occult community. I get a lot of that on my For You page. So I came across this tarot reading that wasn't even a real person. It was clearly AI. The sound was AI, the video was AI. And it was just making these absurd claims saying if you have any of these 15 letters in your first name, this is for you, making all these wild predictions and trying to pass it off as a collective reading. And I remember just getting so angered by that because it's not even a real person. And I know that spiritual TikTok and tarot TikTok and that whole niche, not even a niche, large community of TikTok is such a big place. And I was reading through the comments and a lot of them were just saying, yes, claim, this is going to be mine. And it just made me angry that this wasn't even a real person. And it almost felt like a mockery. And that's why I got angry. And so I created this series to highlight what you should look for when you are following tarot readers on TikTok. If you are learning about tarot and trying to figure out and learn from other readers, I wanted to start this series to show, hey, this is what you shouldn't look for when you're looking at these videos. And then the response to that was overwhelmingly positive. Of course, I did get some people who think that I'm just being a hater, think that
of course.
I'm just trying to start drama. And I say in every video that that's not my intention. My intention is to educate and to break these videos down. And from that, people started leaving comments like, hey, can you talk about tarot readers that you think are good, that you think are legitimate, that are ethical, that you feel need more views or deserve the views that these larger viral videos are getting. And so that's how Trustworthy Tarot started. And that's a lot newer. There's, I think, 3 times as many videos in my Terrible Tarot series as my Trustworthy Tarot series. But, so far it's been really, really great. I'm just really grateful that there are a lot of people who are thankful and appreciative, because it just makes me feel like, okay, maybe I'm doing something right with this series.
Yeah, I think it definitely got to a point where like something needed to be said. I know I've had conversations with other folks too, and this seems to be more prevalent on TikTok, which is interesting. I don't see it as much on Instagram, and I'm not really on YouTube, so I can't really speak to YouTube, but I definitely notice this type of content on TikTok where, you're scrolling and someone's coming up and they're saying things like, like that AI, for example, or someone who's saying, oh, if you're one of these 9 or 10 zodiacs, like, okay, so basically all of the zodiacs, then this message is for you. And you talked about being angered. And my first thought about you being angered was, I think it's because that people are being taken advantage of. And I think that's like, it doesn't sit well with you, just like it doesn't sit well with a lot of us. And, one of the reasons people seek out tarot readers or seek out or are drawn to, especially social media readers, is because usually they're seeking answers to something. Like, think about why someone even goes to see a tarot reader. It's usually honestly the same reason why someone would go see a therapist. Like, they're usually in pain. They're having some sort of emotional experience. They need some sort of guidance. And so when we come across someone who's seemingly practicing from, a kind of a sketchy place, I think your anger is totally valid, because it's like, okay, well, is this person or these people being emotionally manipulated? Is this person preying on the hope that someone is waiting for someone to come back into their life, or, hoping that someone is thinking about them at night? And I think that's something that where some self-awareness comes in too. Like, it's our responsibility to say, am I in the place to even be watching this content right now?
Yes, absolutely. And what I was thinking as you were saying that was I grew up in a evangelical Christian home. I come from an evangelical Christian family. My grandfather was a pastor pretty much his entire life, his whole career, his whole working life. And when I went to a Christian college, got an education, my faith shifted. I no longer call myself a Christian. I don't align myself with many Western Christian values, especially in America. And so I've deconstructed a lot of those beliefs and taken a closer look at the biblical text to understand, okay, there was a context for what was said. There's a reason that verse that you're saying doesn't necessarily align with what you're getting at. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people within the spiritual community who maybe grew up in these environments, they have no problem calling out Christian pastors when they use their biblical texts to, guilt their congregation, shame their congregation, push an agenda that has no business being discussed in a church, a sacred space, when you're trying to connect and learn from the divine. But the second that we talk about tarot, specifically tarot readers on TikTok, misinterpreting these cards and fear mongering, essentially playing off of people's fears and their, like you said, sometimes people aren't in a mentally sound place to be watching these videos, and it feeds into their delusions, if that's too strong of a word to say, but that's what it can, anyone can experience spiritual or religious psychosis. And so you're feeding into people's delusions. Why is it suddenly a problem when it's one of the tarot reader that you follow, or, and then people want to talk about, oh, you're just being a hater, or this is low vibrational energy, or it's not that serious. And it goes back to, doesn't this make you angry though? Or are you just bypassing it? Are you getting these feelings that something's wrong and you're just bypassing it because, well, they're an intuitive medium and it's not going to be for everyone. And it's just what comes through from spirit.
Right. And I think that's where, you make such a good point. And I think that's where it kind of gets a little blurry, right? Because especially from so how, the tarot diagnosis and this podcast and my content comes from this, relatively non-predictive viewpoint where I primarily explore and facilitate tarot as a form of self-healing and self-reflection. And a part of that is telling people like they're allowed to read the cards and interpret them in whatever way feels appropriate to them, based on the feelings that are emerging from the imagery that's in front of them. And it doesn't have to relate to what the card actually means. So it might so right now it might sound like I'm kind of like contradicting myself here, but reading for yourself is also very different than scrolling on TikTok or Instagram and internalizing what someone else is saying about a card. But I think this, it's going back to, maybe people's reaction to your series. On one hand, sure, I get it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that serious, but I think your anger is coming from a place of, okay, those folks who are saying, yeah, it doesn't have to be that serious, maybe can look at what's happening and say, okay, yeah, they mentioned 10 zodiac signs that this is meant for. And okay, that's basically everybody. Oh, it's nice to hear this, but I'm going to move on and scroll. That's one portion of the people who are consuming this content. But then there's the other portion that you were just talking about a moment ago, who might be more emotionally fragile, might be more impressionable, who are now putting all of their like eggs in one basket, so to speak, and just only listening to this tarot reader, or now searching for other tarot readers who can like affirm this message that they've heard, and it can take them down a really dangerous spiral. And I think a lot of times too, folks who especially build up a following very quickly after they've, maybe given a reading that's resonated with a lot of folks, feel like they have to keep doing the same thing that like created maybe a spike in followers. So then also the content becomes created from a place of greed and less of a place from just trying to, like you were saying, educate or, provide a space for people to learn and grow. And I wonder if that's too where like our anger stems from, because it doesn't seem like it's necessarily coming from a place that's truly meant for good. So, when you said people are saying to you, oh, this is like low vibrational energy, I think you are expressing a strong sense of justice and like wanting to protect people. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, yeah, of course, it's totally okay if you're reading for yourself in these moments to really just say, oh, this card brings up a memory of something. And even though it has nothing to do with the card, if it's important to you and in your self-healing journey, that's fine. But yeah, it's important to be careful when you're just scrolling through social media. Like, where are you mentally and emotionally? And are you taking what these people are saying with a grain of salt, or are you taking it as kind of like the end all be all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I've kind of noticed as well, and again, I focus everything from TikTok, right? Because that's the platform that I spend the most time on. And so I can't speak to Instagram, although I feel like it's probably a minor version of TikTok. But one thing too is what I've noticed is that a lot of people, especially if they're more new age spiritual focused, a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that those negative emotions like anger. A lot of people don't want to call out other people when they're blatantly misleading millions of others, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
People don't want to acknowledge, hey, maybe people don't want to be the bearer of bad news. And I was thinking about what you said about how, you use tarot for self-reflection, not necessarily like the predictive or forward-looking, like a lot of people do with tarot. And so I agree with that. I mean, I use tarot in my practice as just like a secondary tool.
Yeah.
Many clients will say that I don't even get to the tarot portion in my sessions because I'm a medium first and foremost. So I focus primarily on that. But I use it as a tool to figure out what the message might be geared towards, what themes are coming up in this person's life. And sometimes those messages are not going to be fun to deliver, but I trust, I set my intentions for every client and say, we're going to keep this constructive yet positive, keeping it with their best interest at heart. And sometimes it's not always positive, but I always try to, everything tries to connect. And I always try to communicate to my client, like, I know this may not be what you want to hear, but this is important because if you're wanting to truly grow, if you're truly wanting to heal or move forward with something in your life, one message that I tell my clients a lot is sometimes to move forward, we have to go back. We have to descend into the shadow work. We have to go back and heal trauma. We have to make amends with other people. We have to set boundaries before we can move forward. And so it's not always going to be positive ascension, love, light. And people, I think a lot of people don't, especially on tarot TikTok or spiritual TikTok, don't want to acknowledge that.
Wow, you bring up such an important point. I was having a discussion about this with someone not too long ago, and I feel like what you're talking about is also a form of toxic positivity. And it is dangerous to only feel like we're, supposed to be talking about like only positive stuff, like good vibes only. Like, oh my God, that's so dangerous.
Yes.
And it does make me think. So, because a lot of these, readers that are kind of questionable when you're scrolling through TikTok, they all, at least from what I've seen, and this is just my experience, my FYP, which thankfully, like I try not to follow a lot of these so they don't show up in my FYP too much. But when I watch one video and I'm just like, oh my God, this is really happening, then I get a couple more.
Yes.
So what I typically see is something like, they'll pull a card like, we'll use the Eight of Pentacles, for example. I've been thinking a lot about the Eight of Pentacles lately, which is traditionally a card that's related to like, work, dedication to a craft. And I think an unethical reader would say something, this goes with like kind of being too positive and playing into people's emotions, and what they really want to hear is like, and this is what I see. I'm not saying this is everybody, but they'll pull a card and they'll say all the time, oh, he can't stop thinking about you. He's on his way back to you. If you came across this message, it's for you. And it's like, you just pulled the Eight of Pentacles though. And someone with someone unfamiliar with tarot who is again in that fragile state, or, really kind of like craving someone or crushing on someone, is going to be like, oh my God, yes, like, thank you so much. I claim this. But an ethical reader who's maybe reading for love, in this instance, and still pulls the Eight of Pentacles, would probably say something like, this person might be preoccupied right now. They might not have the capacity to give you what you need because their priorities are on personal and professional growth. But that's not what people would want to hear.
Nope.
And so that, goes along with what you're saying in terms of like, either people are too positive, or also these readers are really just wanting to send these messages that, in some way are uplifting. And yes, we need that right now in this world, uplifting, but we also don't want to manipulate people or be providing content that's not accurate or also like beneficial, because only providing these messages is also going to give people the wrong idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking, what I'm thinking of is when you come across these videos, a lot of times they will start the video with, if you're coming across this video on January 7th before 1:00 p.m., then this is for you. Or if you're scrolling right now and this is coming up on your For You page, this is for you. And it's almost like, I'm very clairvoyant. So I get a lot of visions in my mind to just help communicate my ideas. But it's almost like, people just get glazed over eyes, almost like, when you think of like an evil villain trying to manipulate the population through like TV, or they'll send a message and be like, he is thinking about you. He is coming back. And it's almost like their sense of autonomy, their critical thinking, their sense of choice completely turns off. And one element that I talked about in my Trustworthy Tarot series, one reader that I covered, I pointed out that she will, maybe not with every video, but many of her videos, she will start off by saying, ask your guides if this is for you, or ask your ancestors if this is for you.
Oh, yes.
And I immediately paused when I was breaking that video down, and I said, I love that. I love that she puts the choice, she puts the intuitive thinking, the intuitive connection in your hands. She's not forcing it on you. She's saying, you go within, you ask your guides if this is for you. And if it is, awesome, keep watching. If it's not, You can keep watching just to see what the message is about, or you can keep scrolling. But it's still important that you realize like you are still your own person. And it creates when you turn off that into like I'm seeing the Page of Cups reversed in my mind when it like in a spiritual context. Like they're so dependent on other people to tell them what is for them that they completely block themselves off to their own guides, their higher self, their ancestors, etc.
Oh, wow. That was actually really powerful. And you bringing in that reverse Page of Cups absolutely holds true here. And I'm so glad that you brought up the Trustworthy tarot example, because it's exactly where I wanted to go to talk about how can we tell the difference. And the word autonomy is so important here, because I think a lot of times people are just saying, yeah, exactly what you just said. Oh, if you come across this at this time, if you're the zodiac, if you're this is for you. And they're just like telling us versus us being able to decide, wait, is this truly for me? So having someone say something like ask your guides, I think is really wise. So I'm curious too, as you've kind of gotten into this Trustworthy Tarot series a little bit more, what are some other signs or ways folks have engaged with their audience that make you say, yes, like this is someone who you should follow. This is someone who you should listen to. Like, what have you noticed other big differences are?
I feel like in order to be aware of what to look for, it comes back to like your sense of self, especially like being in your physical body.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like when a lot of people have these overdependency on these readings, they're not paying attention to what their body's picking up. And what I've noticed, counterpoint the Trustworthy Tarot series, what I've noticed when I watch some videos that are not legitimate, not accurate, not ethical videos, I have noticed that my eyebrows will furrow or my head will turn. Like, wait a second. Like, I can't help it. My face will tell everyone what I'm thinking before I will. But it's just because it's this reaction in my body that's like, wait a second, something's off. Something's not right with that. And so what I do like about Trustworthy Tarot readers is that there seems to be a thread in their message. Everything seems to connect. And, compared to some untrustworthy tarot readers, it feels like they will just fire off very random things like, oh, you could be an Aquarius. The color yellow might mean something to you. I'm seeing 2 blue jays. It's like, what? There's really no thread, or the messages will just pivot. Like there was one reader that I covered where they said, oh, some of you are going to win a game show or a sweepstakes. And then a couple seconds go by and some cards fall out and they go, oh, some of you are going to propose to, engage to. And I remember just like cocking my head and I was like, how did you get that?
Right.
And I think another thing too, this is something that I do like, and as far as Trustworthy Tarot readers go, is when they do explain the cards, when they do break down the cards a little bit. Obviously, like it's not their imperative to give a lesson. Like there's a difference between a lesson and a reading. But especially because a lot of people on Tarot Talk are learning tarot. And if they are showing, like, for example, the 8 of Pentacles and saying, oh, he's thinking about you, he's on your mind, like, show your work. Readers, I feel like it's important that readers need to show their work. And if you know that a lot of people who are watching, who are learning tarot, are not going to know what the 8 of Pentacles means. And they're not going to go to their guidebook because you've given off this impression that you're so trustworthy and that they need to hear your messages. Of course, they're going to take your word for it. So readers, people who don't show their work, people, again, who aren't afraid to go, this isn't, you might have been going through a bit of a rough time because I got, the 5 of Cups and the 10 of Swords reversed, and you're kind of going through a rough time, but, still trying to frame it in a way that's for their best interest, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I feel like when you're just pivoting and it feels like you're just throwing out things in the hopes that it's kind of like just throwing something at a wall, or like, putty at a wall and hoping it will stick. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Or like throwing something at a dartboard and hoping it's going to get the bullseye, when what you should be doing is just showing your work, showing the cards, and going into detail of what those cards are. And that's just the biggest thing.
Yeah. You brought up something a moment ago and I was like, it made me think of something about, especially how a lot of folks on Tarot Talk, because we're specifically kind of focused on TikTok right now, may not be very familiar with these cards, but they're really emotionally drawn and really having this experience that feels good with this person who's saying what they want. And that goes back to something you said earlier about like, pay attention to what's happening with your body. Like, but is this actually like something that feels good, or is this something you want to hear? But also, because if you're someone who isn't entirely familiar with tarot, if you're just learning and you don't know all the cards, one, that's totally okay. But also, if you come across someone on TikTok and you really like what they're saying, write down the cards that they're pulling in the message, or save the video, and then pull up your guidebook, go Google the cards and decide then for yourself, like, does this message line up? Does it still resonate with me based on now the knowledge that I've gained? We should all be a little skeptical of what we're seeing on the internet.
Absolutely.
So find out for yourself. If someone's not giving you the autonomy, like, make sure that you're making the autonomy, like your own autonomy, a priority still when it comes to this.
And I think another thing too, I mean, just not to like counter argue or counterpoint, but what I'm thinking of, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, which was that a lot of people don't want to do the work. A lot of people, I think, on Tarot Talk will just scroll and look for whatever videos to make them feel better about themselves. And then they'll just go about the rest of their day. I think a lot of people, and maybe this is something I'm tapping into collectively, like collectively, there are still some people who are afraid to do the shadow work, who are afraid to actually learn what the cards mean for themselves, because it might mean that it might shatter the illusion of what they've seen of tarot, or what they, their understanding of tarot when they actually learn it themselves. And I think one thing too that's kind of coming into play here is, yes, there's a meaning and there's a definition for each of the cards, but there is also an intuitive way that comes through when you read tarot. Like, yes, some of the, especially if you read reversals, like some of the reverse cards can change just depending on the surrounding energy. And I think one thing that's coming through is like that intuitive part should never make you feel confused. It should never make you feel worried or panicked or anxious. And I think when a lot of people watch these tarot videos and they comment because out of desperation, they feel like they have to, like, yes, I claim on every video. It's like they're feeding into their own anxiety that it's playing into people's fears, people's worries. And that's not what intuitive connection is at all. That's where, and I tell my people, like, that's the difference between your mental health, anxiety, whatever you struggle with versus listening to your intuition. Because that's another thing that I get is like when people are learning tarot, like, okay, people who are like, I know the cards, I know what these cards mean, but I still have trouble getting them to connect and everything. And I'm like, well, that just takes time. Like, that's understandable.
Exactly.
Like, you learn by doing. But if you're watching other readers as you're learning tarot and you're starting to get that, wait a second, this doesn't connect. Like, your mind starts to race and it feels more like you're trying to piece the puzzles together as opposed to, oh my gosh, yes, that makes sense. That resonates. Finding that thread. I think that should be, that should give people some caution and make them think twice about a lot of these readers on Tarot Talk.
Yeah, you said something I want to go back to, and I just made this connection. It might age me a bit. you know how people on TikTok specifically will say things like, comment that you claim. And again, it's telling people what to do. But it's also a form of manipulation. They want you to comment so that their engagement rate goes up, so that they're seen more in the algorithm. And it reminds me of those chain emails back in the day.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like super aging myself right now.
No, I know exactly, because I'm there with you. Right? I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it was like, you would get this email and it was like, if you don't send this to 10 people, you're going to have horrible luck for 7 years. And I mean,
or your mom will fall sick, or your mom will die. And it's like, why you got to put my mom into this?
Right.
Like, what did she do?
Right. And so, plays to our anxiety, like, oh my God, I have to do this because I don't want this bad karmic energy. And I think that's where we really need to question, well, hold on, what is this negative energy, so to speak, that's going to happen to me? And who has the power to even say that I'm going to have that negative energy if I don't forward this or claim this or whatever? So I think this really goes back to the discussion on autonomy and really checking in with yourself and why do I feel this way? Why do I feel compelled to say claim? Like, why do I feel compelled to listen to what this person is telling me versus really sitting and asking myself, like, is this good for me right now? From a mental health perspective, I think we also need to be checking in. Am I in a place to even be scrolling on TikTok, watching tarot readers? You might not be, and that's okay. But I think you should be asking yourself that, especially if like, oh, you watch someone and you're that kind of, you said, listen to your body. If your heart starts racing and you're like, I need to find another one, then it's probably time to take a break and say, I probably shouldn't be in this space right now. Yes,
absolutely. Especially because like, I just keep going back to the whole like fear mongering, like fear and shame and guilt, especially like I'm thinking about, when we were younger and we got those 2000s chain emails, or for me, I'm not sure. Like for me, it also kind of transferred over to MySpace and like you would see those bulletins and like repost or reshare the bulletins.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I know. I'm like MySpace. That was
remember those days.
Good times. Oh, so much fun, so much drama. Yeah. No, but like you read these emails and it when the second that you read it, if you, especially when you're growing up in like a Christian home like I did, like you already have feelings of like fear and shame and guilt. And like, I need to be in this church. I need to have this faith or else I am no one. I am nothing. I am going to spend the rest of my life after this in an awful, awful place. And that's not anything healthy. Like, especially because fear more often than not is just an illusion. I mean, that's not to say that like, fear and danger are two completely different things. But like when you operate from a place of fear, it just, you're not going to grow a whole lot because you're doing everything that you can to kind of like, stay in one place or not, not lose anything, or, you're putting, it's a weird mix of energy where you are taking whatever is coming your way. And then, but you're not, it's just like, you're kind of absorbing it and you're not, it's almost like creating so many layers of gunk and filth that by the time you're able to break out of it, you're like, whoa, I need to do a lot of work to kind of unpack like where this, unpack where all of this came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You bring up such good points. And I almost feel like, so we've been talking so much about tarot. I kind of want to pull some cards now though.
Sure. Yeah.
So we can pull together if you want, or like kind of like compare, like create maybe a spread together. But yeah, I want to pull, and I feel like it might be beneficial to pull on. Sometimes I don't even pull to a prompt. I like to just pull a few cards and see the story that they tell. So are you comfortable with that? Can we do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and feel free to pull as well if you want. I'm using Tarot Vintage, and I'm just going to see what comes out.
Okay. And I'm using the Tattoo Tarot deck.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Okay.
Oh my God, stop it.
I mean, I know. It's okay.
Literally? Do you want to know what the first card that popped out? You're going to laugh because I got the Hanged Man. Does that sound familiar?
Oh my God, that's actually so great.
I would like literally was like, stop it right now.
How many cards did you pull?
I think I'm going to do 3.
Okay, that's so what I did. Okay,
so 3 I just got the second one, and then I just got the third one. Oh, interesting.
All right. So, well, I'll tell you what I have, and then you tell me what you have, and we can compare notes.
Okay.
All right. So I pulled Queen of Wands, reversed Knight of Cups, and then 5 of Swords.
Whoa.
So, yeah, I have thoughts, but what did you pull?
I pulled the Hanged Man, the Chariot, and the 10 of Wands, all upright.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. So maybe we can let's just talk about each other's spreads then. So, first, all right. So with the Queen of Wands, my initial thought, I mean, I feel like the Queen of Wands, I kind of wish it came out reverse, but it feels like that kind of charismatic, allure that these creators tend to have, where they kind of like are portrayed as like, hey, I have the answers and I have the experience. And we tend to be drawn to that, at least like at face value. But I love this Knight of Cups reversed because I feel like that's exactly what we've been talking about regarding kind of that emotional instability that we tend to be in, or kind of that just like representing the emotional place we're in when we're scrolling. We might be emotionally vulnerable or overwhelmed, having a hard time processing painful experiences. And the Five of Swords, like
that is the ickiest card to me, is the Five of Swords.
I know, because I feel like it's okay. So I feel like it represents kind of like the longer term experience of not really getting what the unethical readers are suggesting. Like they're suggesting that you're going to get the stuff, but you're not actually getting it. And then the unethical readers themselves are getting something instead, right? So they're the guy in the foreground holding these, three swords with this like kind of smug look on their face, because they're getting the followers, they're getting the higher reach, they're getting the engagement, they're probably making money off of you. And this card just feels like what we're talking about. This like you said, icky, like unethical, like conflict. So I feel like that just kind of summed up our conversation, but I'm loving your cards, especially like the two majors and the 10 of wands. So tell me what you're thinking.
So when I'm looking at these cards, like the first thing that I'm hearing in my mind is like, you're not getting anywhere. You're not getting anywhere. The Hanged Man obviously like represents people. I feel like the collective just kind of stuck in this energy and just kind of waiting for things to pass, not realizing that they might need to examine their own attitude towards their life. You know what I mean? Like releasing negative thoughts or beliefs about spirituality. And then obviously with the Chariot, like in this context, especially with the 10 of Wands, like the Chariot makes me feel like, these readers who, the Chariot to me like is like about force, especially in certain contexts. And so I feel like what I'm seeing with this is like someone who's trying to force a message, or someone who's hearing these messages and trying to almost apply it to a situation in their life, not realizing that when they're doing that, they're kind of shutting themselves off from other spiritual opportunities that are trying to present itself to them, but they wouldn't know it because they're so fixated on one area when there could be other areas or just other messages that their guides are trying to get through, but they wouldn't know it because they're not hearing it, especially with the Hanged Man. Like the Hanged Man always just kind of gives off this like really disconnected energy. I'm thinking of how it's affiliated with Neptune in astrology.
Right.
And then obviously with the 10 of Wands and the Chariot almost gives me the sense of like, do you even know where you're going? You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
Like, you're carrying a lot, but you've kind of lost your way a little bit. And not only that, but it's almost like what I'm seeing with the 10 of Wands is like, the man holding the wands, and it's like every tarot message is just kind of piled on his back and telling him like, you need to claim this, you need to claim this, you need to do this, you need to do all of these things, to the point where it's like, dude, you're gonna burn out, you're gonna crash and burn. Like, especially I'm thinking like mentally, what that does to a person. Right. And so especially like I almost wish the 10 of Wands was reversed too, because it's almost like it brings about this awareness, like you need to let this go. Like you need to let go of what other people are saying about you and what you need to do with your spiritual path, and start taking care of yourself, putting yourself first.
Wow. That was a really powerful read, especially that 10 of Wands and Chariot together. I really love where you went with that, because you said something that just like, I just kept repeating it in my head. Do you actually know where you're going? Yeah. Because a lot of times you can be taking what people are saying in these readings and they're taking you somewhere. And if you look at the imagery of the 10 of Wands, like this person's head is typically down, like the wands are in front of them, and they're just moving in a direction kind of aimlessly because they can't actually see where they're going. So they're being blindly led. So that's something that you have to be really aware of. And then something that you were also talking about is, do those 10 wands even belong to you? Like, are those wands that you've taken from all of these, readers who, you think that it resonates, but maybe, you haven't truly touched in with your intuition or your autonomy. And so you're taking these messages and they're actually weighing you down, doing the opposite of what you were wanting them to do. So Wow, that was actually really powerful. I love that those cards came out. I feel like we should pull a card for maybe advice or guidance now, like what to do, like when you find yourself in this position. So let's do that.
Okay. Come on. You ever just get like a really good shuffle, like when you are like holding them and you're like, oh, that was so good.
So satisfying, right? Yes.
Okay. So guidance when you find yourself in this situation.
Yeah.
Just one card.
Oh, I got a good one.
Oh, come on. Oh my gosh. Oh, a whole bunch jumped out, but I'm going with the one on top. Wow.
Okay. What'd you get?
I got strength.
Oh, that's so sweet. I got temperance. We each pulled majors.
Yes. Oh, and then I also got the 6 of Pentacles on the bottom. I just felt like I had to.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Oh, I love the 6 of Pentacles too. Okay, so tell me what you're thinking with strength and the 6 of Pentacles.
Oh my goodness. So strength obviously like is all about that inner strength. I love always juxtapositioning, whatever, strength and the Chariot, because the Chariot obviously is like that external, like that will, that focus, that determination. But like strength, I feel like is all about having that connection with your higher self, having that inner strength and balance, knowing that you are the one that should be deciding what messages are for you. You are the one that should be listening to when a message is for you. Like you are the one that should be going within. And then obviously with the 6 of Pentacles, like strength, both of these cards to me talk about also being in a community of people that actually want to help you succeed and don't just want something to gain financially. Like obviously with the 6 of Pentacles, yes, there can be a reciprocity of like finances, you know what I mean? Like, but what I'm seeing is like, if you finding a tarot reader, finding a medium, finding a psychic, what have you, that, you know, you're obviously paying something for, but what you get back is so much, is like equal to that financial value, if that makes sense. You know, they're not trying to take advantage of you. They're not trying to hold something over your head and saying, oh, if you want more time, then you can pay me a $20 extra. You know what I mean? Like these cards are talking about like finding a group of people that truly have your best interest at heart. And also like believing in yourself and finding your own path with the strength card.
Absolutely. Which I love that you brought it in. That if you have more time, $20 more, because that's actually a story I told you. I was like, am I going to tell this story? I love that you brought it up. But yeah, that actually, I won't go into like all the details, it's a long story, but that did actually happen to me. Like, and so that's these wild. Unethical readers do happen in person too, where they had pulled like a third of the deck. So it was 10 minutes. And I'm not joking. It was 5, 10, 15 cards in 10 minutes.
That's wild.
And then at the end, they were like, oh, and none of the cards, of course, aligned with what they were saying. And then they were like, I have something valuable to tell you or something really important. Do you want to spend more money? Or basically, and I was like, no, I'm okay. Thanks. Bye.
I think I know what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. But I love the cards. I love that 6 of Pentacles, actually, because I think that's so fitting for this, you using the word reciprocity and like making sure that, what you're giving and what you're receiving is also of, some sort of like equitable value. So, and I feel like that actually kind of blends in nicely with the Temperance card, because I think, with Temperance, so as you're engaging with, folks on social media and different readers, I think it's important to go back and make sure, like, are you still grounded, even if you're feeling an emotional like connection or pull to a reader, because Temperance, 1 foot on land, 1 foot in water. And something you actually talk about often when you're doing your series is take these readings with a grain of salt. And I feel like Temperance is kind of alluding to that. Like, hey, don't give this person all your like water or resources, right? Because they have the 2 cups here and it's like blending back and forth. And in traditional imagery, it's like this blending of water and wine. So it's important to be paying attention to like, okay, am I just putting everything in this one cup and saying, yes, this is it. This is, all or nothing. Or am I allowing myself to exist in multiple spaces at once and not just take everything, that's coming to me as the end all be all?
Absolutely. And what I'm kind of seeing, like when I think of Temperance in the reverse energy, like that imbalanced energy, like what I'm seeing are people who are just impulsively spending, like just throwing their money to get some sort of instant answers, instant gratification. And that's to distract themselves, like from that imbalance, that internal imbalance that they're feeling. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. I love the cards that we pulled. Like that's
I
actually
know.
really exciting.
Yes.
I feel like
I think
so
they're
fitting.
perfect. Yes, they're
I do
perfect.
too. Thank you so much for spending time with me today to talk about this because I feel like it's something that really needed to be talked about. And I know that a lot of folks have, probably been thinking the same thing. So I know that is probably going to give people something to think about. And I would love for
Yeah.
you to share where folks can find you and what you have going on.
Absolutely, yes. So I am primarily on TikTok. I go by Moonlight Medium. My username is Annie Cabani on TikTok. I'm also on Instagram, smaller audience, but my handle on Instagram is Anniekin Skywalker, all one word.
Nice.
And that's mostly the two major platforms that I, connect with clients and followers on. Both of those do have links to my website, moonlightmedium.co. And that is where people can check out my services, what I offer, my pricing, all of that good stuff. And I do offer payment plans and sliding scales as well for those who are financially constrained or on a budget.
That's amazing. And I just want to say Annie has wonderful energy. They're so fun to talk to. So please check them out. You'll really enjoy their content. Thank you so much for listening to the Tarot Diagnosis. For more tarot and mental health content, follow the Tarot Diagnosis on Instagram. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode and sign up to receive the Tarot Diagnosis emails where you'll have access to exclusive spreads and exciting announcements. To join an incredible community of tarot and psychology enthusiasts, join the Tarot Diagnosis membership community, The Symposium, by visiting thetarotdiagnosis.com.